We are very proud to announce Bethany as the new CEO of Carrera Technologies. It felt like a punch to the gut. My name is Nancy Carrera, and in that moment, my world collapsed. The conference room was filled with lukewarm applause and forced smiles. My parents stood at the head of the dark oak table, smiling with a gleam in their eyes that I had only ever seen directed at one person, Bethany, my older sister. She stood beside them, visibly surprised by the announcement, but not at all displeased. Her eyes widened for a moment, then she smiled. That sweet, diplomatic smile she had always known how to wear so perfectly. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat driving the pain deeper inside me. My fists were clenched beneath the table. The co-workers who knew me well avoided eye contact. They knew. They knew it was wrong. They knew how much I deserved it. But no one said a word. 15 years earlier. I was only 7 when I discovered that numbers understood me better than people. While other kids collected dolls, I collected circuits and old motherboards my father discarded from the company. I'd sneak them out, take them apart, put them back together. I wanted to understand what made a machine think. I wanted to create. I wanted to transform. I remember a rainy Saturday when I took the old radio from the living room up to my bedroom. I spent hours with a screwdriver, opening it up, analyzing every part. When I finally put it back together, with a makeshift Bluetooth adapter and music playing straight from my MP3 player, I ran to the kitchen, my chest bursting with pride. "Look, Mom, look what I did with the radio." She didn't even look up from her phone. "That's nice, dear." My dad walked in right after, bringing Bethany home from ballet class. "Bethany nailed every step of the choreography today," he exclaimed, as if she had solved the energy crisis. "Her teacher says she has natural talent." He lifted her into the air and spun her around, laughing. I stood there, holding the radio now blasting Coldplay at full volume, as if it too wanted to be heard. Over time, I became invisible. Not from absence, but from constant comparison. Bethany was the golden child. Elegant, sociable, charming. When she spoke, people listened. And me? I was the weirdo in the room full of computers, the nerd writing scripts to predict our city's weather patterns while other kids played with dolls. "You should go out more, Nancy," my mom would say, running her hand through Bethany's hair. "Learn how to behave in society. Look at your sister, always so well balanced." Balanced? Bethany didn't even know the house Wi-Fi password. Meanwhile, I had already created 3 virtual assistant prototypes before turning 12. But that didn't seem to matter. Not even when, at 16, I built a logistics optimization program for the family's software company that saved thousands in shipping costs. Not even when, at 18, I turned down a full scholarship to MIT just to keep working with them. I desperately wanted to be seen, to be validated. Not by strangers, by my parents. But they only had eyes for her. The company began to sink when I was 24. The market had shifted. Old solutions were no longer competitive. My parents seemed exhausted, lost. I saw the desperation creep into meetings, into silent dinners, into their vacant stares. It was during one of those days, staring at the quarterly spreadsheets, the red numbers practically bleeding on the screen, that the idea struck me like lightning. Century Core. An automation system based on predictive AI, capable of optimizing processes in real time and reducing operational failures by over 80%. I worked through countless nights on the project. Line after line of code, tests, tweaks, optimizations. I did it all on my own. Slept in the office, drank cold coffee from the old machine, read scientific articles at 3 a.m. It was exhausting. But it was mine. When I finally presented the prototype, my dad looked at the screen with skepticism. "Are you sure this works?" I tested it with data from the West Branch. Efficiency increased by 46% in 1 week. My mom crossed her arms. "And this artificial intelligence thing, isn't it dangerous?" I swallowed hard. "Only if it's badly programmed. I wrote every line. You can trust it." They approved it reluctantly, but they had no choice. They were sinking, and I was the lifeboat. 3 months later, the company had tripled its profits. 6 months later, we were in the green like never before. Industry magazines started mentioning us. Emails from investors flooded in. Clients who had left us came running back. Century Core became the beating heart of Carrera Technologies. At that year's Christmas party, Bethany got a new car, a white convertible Audi with a red bow. My parents announced the gift in front of all the employees. Applause, smiles, champagne. Then my dad came up to me with a glass in hand. "You did a good job, Nancy. We're very grateful." A pat on the shoulder. Gratitude. As if I had changed a light bulb in the reception area, not saved the company from bankruptcy. Still, I kept going. For years. Writing code, solving crises, reinventing strategies. Working while Bethany traveled, explored new fields, tried to find herself. Sometimes I thought about leaving, starting my own company. I had the talent, the connections, the reputation in the industry. But something kept me there. Something almost childish. They'll see. One day, they'll see who I really am. And that's exactly what I thought. Until the day of the meeting. That day changed everything. It was a spring morning, one of those that carries a promise in the air. Sunlight streamed obliquely through the glass-paneled windows of the Carrera Technologies conference room, painting the white walls with golden reflections. Outside, the trees bloomed in soft shades of pink and yellow, as if the world out there already knew something good was about to happen. Inside, everything was filled with anticipation. The room was crowded. Directors, managers, even a few interns had been invited. Some whispered quietly. Others cast curious glances toward the main table, where my parents sat side by side. Both wore clothes more formal than usual. My father, in a navy blue suit and burgundy tie, checked his watch with disguised impatience. My mother adjusted her emerald silk scarf with a gentle smile, the same smile she used whenever she wanted to make everything look under control. And there I was, seated in the third chair from the right, a closed notebook on my lap and my fingers intertwined over it. My heart beat like a muffled drum, not from doubt, but from certainty. I knew what was coming. At least, I thought I did. Everything that day carried symbolic weight. Behind the scenes, there had already been talk of a leadership transition. My parents were finally ready to pass the torch. And in the previous weeks, every conversation, every decision, everything pointed to me. Me, the daughter who built the software that saved the company, as the one about to receive the baton. My parents stood up at the same time, as if they had rehearsed the moment. My father cleared his throat and the murmurs stopped. The room fell into silence. "Thank you all for being here on such a special morning," he began, using that ceremonial tone he reserved for important occasions. "Today we're here to make an announcement that will define the future of Carrera Technologies." My eyes burned. Not from exhaustion, but emotion. I could feel the moment drawing near. Finally, recognition. Finally, my place. My mother took over. "Many of you have followed our journey. You know these haven't been easy years, that we were on the brink of collapse." She looked directly at me. "But you also know there was someone whose dedication, intelligence, and resilience were crucial in getting us here." My heart raced. I almost smiled. "Nancy, dear," she said in that soft voice, her hand resting on her chest like she was about to offer me the world. "Your dedication is inspiring, and we are deeply grateful for everything you've built here." I sat up straighter in my chair. The room seemed to shrink, as if everything else faded away. This was it. My moment. My father resumed. "And that's why—" I could almost hear my name on his lips. My body leaned slightly forward, instinctively. "We're very proud to announce—" He turned slightly to the side. I followed his gaze. "Bethany Carrera will be the new CEO of Carrera Technologies." For a second that felt like an eternity, I didn't understand. The sound around me turned into a distant echo. My eyes searched his, waiting for a correction. A laugh. A "just kidding, Nancy." But no. The silence that followed was real. The warmth drained from my hands. "What?" I almost whispered, but no one heard. Or if they did, they ignored it. Bethany, seated farther away, leaned forward, visibly surprised. She furrowed her brow, then laughed. a little awkwardly. Wow, thank you? I didn't even know you were considering me. My father laughed too, as if that made everything more digestible. Leadership sometimes chooses people in unexpected ways, sweetheart. Then came the applause. Cold, hesitant, some out of obligation, others out of pure confusion. The eyes that had watched me with anticipation now avoided mine. I sat there, frozen, my soul motionless. In my head, a whirlwind began to spin. I saw flashes, sleepless nights in front of the computer, my face lit by the screen, the graphs, the reports I created, the solutions no one else thought of. And Bethany, with her travels, her unfinished courses, her honest disinterest. And yet, she was the chosen one. The anger began as a hot line in my stomach. It rose like smoke to my chest, but I didn't cry. Not in that room. My eyes met hers. Bethany. And for the first time, I saw a trace of guilt. She knew. She knew this wasn't right. But she didn't say anything. Of course not. My mother spoke again, as if explaining an obvious equation. Bethany has a modern vision, a sensitivity we believe is essential for the company's future. Sensitivity? I saved this company from bankruptcy with a system that takes months just to understand, let alone build. But of course, sensitivity. The meeting ended with toasts and smiles. I left without saying a word. No one tried to stop me. The night fell like a sheet of lead over me. I lay down on my bed fully clothed, stayed there, motionless, staring at the ceiling. The darkness of the room was less cruel than the memory of that morning. I closed my eyes and saw scenes from the past, one after another. Me, at 12, handing in my first prototype for a scheduling system. My dad saying, "You should ask Bethany to help format that properly. She writes better." Me, at 17, winning a state-level programming competition. My mom saying, "Congratulations, sweetheart. But don't forget Bethany's presenting at the gallery next week." And more recently, me next to the central server, performing a system migration at midnight, while Bethany posted stories from a spiritual retreat in Arizona. They never saw me. Or worse, they never wanted to. They'll never see me. Never. My voice came out hoarse. It was the first thing I had said in hours. And the last before absolute silence took over. But then, in that early morning, between painful thoughts and an overwhelming urge to disappear, something sparked inside me. A flicker, a whisper, a memory, the patent. Century Core was my creation, my project, and the intellectual property was registered in my name. They could have the company, the titles, the spotlight. But the heart beating at the center of Carrera Technologies, the system that drove everything, that generated the profits, that formed the backbone of the entire structure, was mine. I sat up in bed slowly, as if the weight of that truth was anchoring me back to reality. The room was dark, but for the first time in days, my mind was clear. No, I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't seek validation from those who only knew how to underestimate me. I was going to do what I did best, act with intelligence. And this time, it would be different. This time they would feel it. The next day didn't begin with sunlight. It began with silence. And a message. One that would set my plan in motion. The next day dawned gray, as if the sky reflected exactly what I felt inside. A contained, silent fury about to erupt. But me? I walked into the office with my head held high, my back straight, and each step measured with surgical precision. The heels of my shoes echoed down the main hallway like a countdown. 1, 2, 3, end. As I approached the conference room, I heard laughter, light, relaxed chuckles. I immediately recognized my mother's lively tone, my father's exaggerated laugh, and my sister's voice, melodic, superficial, always in the right pitch to please. They were gathered there, happy, as if nothing had happened. As if the blow they dealt me the day before was just an irrelevant detail. The door was ajar. I pushed it open with my palm, without knocking. They were around the oval oak table, coffee cups in hand, laughing at some silly thing Bethany had said. She was gesturing enthusiastically, wearing that light blazer that barely disguised her involuntary disdain for everything involving the company. Everyone turned to me, still smiling. Time stopped for a moment. "Dad, Mom," my voice came out firm, clear, with a coldness that surprised me. "I'm resigning from the company." My father's laugh died in the air. His forehead furrowed as if he was trying to understand the language I was speaking. My mother made a quick grimace, eyes half closed, then let out a little laugh. "Nancy, dear, now is not the time for jokes," she said, still convinced I was dramatizing. My father leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and sighed. Condescension dripped from him like poison. "Look, Nancy, I know yesterday was hard for you, but Bethany is already settling in well. We'll be fine, right?" He smiled at me like someone trying to convince a spoiled child she didn't get the toy but still had a room full of others. The urge to leap onto that table and sweep it away with my arms was almost uncontrollable. But control was all I had. Bethany stood up, adjusted her blazer, and took a few steps toward me. Her face was impassive, but those eyes didn't fool me. She knew. She knew I had some card up my sleeve, but she didn't know which one. Yet. "Nancy," she said, her voice measured, trying to sound reasonable. "You have every right to move on. If that's what you need, great. But please don't dramatize, okay? You're better than this." Better than this. Always that phrase. Always that way of telling me I should accept the supporting role with a smile on my lips, as if dignity had a punch-in time. I took a deep breath, stepped forward twice, and faced the three of them. My parents still expected me to back down, to apologize, to say it was just heat of the moment. But then came the blow. "I just want to remind you of one thing." They stared at me. My father raised his eyebrows. Bethany pressed her lips together. "Century Core," I continued, pausing between the words, "was patented in my name. The usage license is mine, and it," I smiled, "expires today." The silence that followed was absolute. No sound, no breath, not even the distant hum of the server downstairs. It was as if the world stopped to hear the invisible crash of that moment. "What?" my father stammered. The word barely escaped, as if stuck in his throat. My mother brought her hand to her mouth, as if feeling a pang in her chest. "Bethany?" She just stared at me, jaw tense, eyes wide. The poised woman's facade began to crack, like porcelain under pressure. "What do you mean the license expires today?" my father asked, raising his voice as if volume could change the facts. "This is a joke, right? The company, we use the software daily." I tilted my head like someone listening to a child trying to solve a quantum physics equation. I could taste the panic between the lines. I could see the realization sinking in. It's not a joke. I pointed to the small folder in my hands, opened it, and pulled out a printed copy of the patent documents. The paper slid across the table with an audible whisper. "You can check. Everything is registered in my name. And the usage license was temporary. I warned at the time. In the footnote of the proposal, page 3. Bethany hurried to grab the paper, as if reading it could annul reality. But I already knew. She didn't read technical documents. Never did. "You can continue, of course," I finished. "But you'll need a new system. Or to negotiate a new license. And considering the circumstances..." I paused, looking directly at my mother. "I'd say the previous terms are no longer valid." The conference room, the scene of my greatest humiliation, was now witness to the turning point. And for the first time, my parents were completely speechless. "Good luck with the legacy systems," I concluded, smiling softly as someone who had nothing left to lose. Then I turned around. Each step toward the door was a drumbeat in their chests. I touched the doorknob. Before leaving, I looked over my shoulder. "Oh, and thank you for finally showing me who I really am to you. Now I know too." The door clicked shut behind me. It wasn't loud, but to me, it sounded like the end of a symphony. It didn't take long. for them to feel the impact. 3 days after I left Carrera Technologies, the unthinkable began to happen. It all started subtly. A glitch here, a corrupted report there. The directors thought it was a common server fluctuation. After all, no one there really understood how Century Core worked in its deepest layers, except me. I built every line of that system with the precision of a watchmaker, and I also programmed security mechanisms for when legitimate access expired. On the 4th day, the failures multiplied. Internal systems began crashing during critical operations. Contract automation froze. Invoices stopped being generated, and the client integration algorithms started returning random errors. By then, cancellations began falling like an avalanche. Partner companies that relied on our system to maintain their own operations were already at their limit. Carrera Technologies' legal department, once so calm, was now drowning in notices. Some clients demanded refunds, others penalties. 1 or 2 threatened multi-million lawsuits for breach of contract. The board panicked. I heard about it from friends still working there, sending me frantic messages, trying to understand what was going on. But I didn't answer. Not then. My phone buzzed nonstop. Notifications, calls, emails marked urgent. I silenced them all, turned off the phone, deleted the email app. I made a point of disappearing. The silence was finally mine. But silence, for someone in free fall, is deafening. On the 6th night, someone knocked on my door. It was late. I was barefoot in sweatpants, drinking warm tea in the dim light of my apartment. The knock was firm, determined. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, my heart jumped. It was my father. In a wrinkled suit, loosened tie, his face tired. There was something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Defeat. For a moment, we just stared at each other. No words. The time between us, so full of noise and hurt, seemed frozen. "Nancy," he began, voice hoarse, "we need to talk." The phrase was simple, but in that moment it carried the weight of everything he never said. I crossed my arms, leaning against the door. "You said you could handle it," I replied coldly. "Where's Bethany? Wasn't she the sensitive one, the modern leader?" He lowered his eyes for a second. When he looked back at me, there was something more there. Fatigue, yes, but also something like regret or shame. "She doesn't know what to do. She's panicking." He ran his hand across his face. "The truth, Nancy, is no one there knows, and we need you." That phrase, "we need you." How long it took to come. How it hurt to hear it only now, when the house was already on fire. "Oh, now you see?" I said, bitter with every syllable. "After humiliating me in that room, after a lifetime putting me second?" He didn't answer. Just stood there, hands in pockets like a man who doesn't know where to hide from his own guilt. I closed the door slowly, not harshly, not shouting, just closed it. The next day, it was my mother who called. When I saw her name on the screen, I almost didn't answer. But there was something in me, maybe still fragile, maybe cruel, that wanted to hear. Her voice came trembling from the other side of the line, and for the first time in my life, she was crying. "Daughter," she said, in a broken whisper, "please come back." Silence. On the other side, I could hear her uneven breathing. My heart clenched, not out of pity, but from an old pain never acknowledged. It was as if, for a second, the forgotten teenager inside me was hearing something she dreamed of hearing her whole life. But I said nothing. I just hung up. That night, while staring at the city from my window, watching the lights flicker on the horizon, the last piece fell into place. Bethany sent me a message. Only 4 words. "You won. I knew." I read those words over and over until they became irrelevant. I knew what they meant, and more than that, I knew what they didn't mean. She wasn't apologizing. Not really. It was a bitter acknowledgement. A sign of surrender. Perhaps even relief, like someone who always knew the place wasn't hers but accepted it while she could. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I won. But that wasn't enough. I didn't want to just come back as the savior, the daughter called back in desperation. I didn't want to fix what they destroyed, only to see them continue at the top as if nothing happened. No. I wanted more. And that night, I drew the terms of my return, one by one, and none of them involved mercy. The sun filtered through the panoramic windows of Carrera Technologies' conference room, casting a golden light that sharply contrasted with the thick tension in the air. It was a quiet morning, but every step, every breath, seemed amplified. The solid oak table, once the stage of my humiliation, now awaited me like a throne. This time I was not a guest. I was the architect of the moment. I summoned everyone, the senior executives, the department heads, the legal team, marketing, and of course my parents and Bethany. No one knew exactly what to expect. Some thought I would come begging, others that I would pour more gasoline on the fire. But only I knew what was about to happen. I wore a dark gray suit with an impeccable cut. The onyx necklace hanging from my neck was not just an accessory, it was armor. My hair was tied in a low bun, as firm as my purpose. When I entered the room, the conversation stopped. The sound of my heels echoing on the marble floor was like the beat of a drum announcing war. I sat at the head of the table, the same one where, weeks ago, my parents had announced Bethany as CEO. The irony was not lost. My gaze swept the room. I saw anxious faces, pleading looks, others embarrassed. No one dared speak. Until I broke the silence. Let's begin. My voice was low, controlled, but every syllable carried weight. I opened the folder in front of me and took out a single document. The title in bold letters at the top read, Proposal for Regaining Control, Nancy Carrera. I've been approached more than once in the last few days, first by my father, then by my mother, and finally, Bethany. My eyes met hers and she quickly looked away. She was seated at the opposite end of the table, wearing a wine-colored blazer, freshly manicured nails, but the usual glow of self-confidence that surrounded her was gone. Only visible exhaustion, a subtle emptiness remained. Her slumped shoulders said what she would never admit aloud. She was out of place. I continued. They all said the same thing with different words. The company needs me. The software I created is not just a tool. It is the heart of this place. And you forgot that it beats in my name. My father, sitting to my right, looked uncomfortable. He was smoothing his wedding ring with his thumb, an old nervous tic he had when he knew he was wrong. My mother kept her eyes fixed on a point on the table, as if focusing on something still could prevent the impending collapse. Then I took a deep breath and dropped the bomb. I'm coming back, but on my terms. I heard a soft murmur at the back of the room, quickly silenced. Everyone knew this was not a negotiation. It was a verdict. The condition is simple. From today, I want full control. Not as CTO, not as a consultant. I am the new CEO of Carrera Technologies. Period. I let the silence speak for me for a few seconds. Then I added, with surgical coldness, Bethany can stay if she wants. As a creative consultant, that position will be created especially for her. But the leadership is mine. The tension in the room turned into absolute silence. For a moment, no one breathed. My father leaned back slowly in his chair, looked at my mother. She, in turn, stared at him as if silently asking permission to react. But there was no protest, no denial, just a long pause, and finally a nod. All right, he said at last. His voice was low, almost resigned. It's fair. My mother closed her eyes and nodded slowly. Bethany remained still, as if waiting to wake up from a nightmare. But there were no more illusions, no turning back. I took the appointment contract from the folder and slid it across the table to them. The legal department had already validated everything. The missing signatures were now only a formality. And one by one they signed. My parents, with hesitant hands. Bethany took longer. For a moment I thought she would refuse. But in the end, she took the pen. With an almost imperceptible sigh, she scribbled her name with feigned firmness. then pushed the paper back without looking at me. When the last signature was made, I stood calmly, adjusted my suit, took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long time, felt something inside me align. As if a forgotten gear finally started turning at the right rhythm. A piece that, after years loose, had found its place. Looking around, I saw different faces. Some showed relief, others hope, and one or two shame. And then, something unexpected happened. One of the directors, Sam, head of finance, stood up and began clapping. It was shy at first, then Jenna, from the development team. In seconds, the whole room rose in applause. It wasn't just a formal gesture. There was emotion there, recognition, perhaps even regret. I saw them differently in that moment, as if finally, at last, they were seeing me too. I didn't smile. I just nodded, silently, because this was not a happy ending. It was justice. It was a return to what was always mine by right. "Thank you," I said. "We will rebuild, but this time, my way." The meeting ended orderly. Everyone left in respectful silence. Only Bethany stayed behind, still seated. "You won," she murmured when we were alone. "I survived," I corrected. "I still don't know if this is victory or just maturity." She seemed about to say something but held back. Just stood up, grabbed her bag, and left. I stayed there, alone, in the room, looking out at the city stretching beyond the windows. The view was the same, but now I saw it from another place. The top. The throne, the home, and for the first time in years, I was at peace. Or almost. Because deep down I knew, what if you win everything, but the wound never heals? Carrera Technologies flourished like a phoenix in controlled combustion. In the first month under my leadership, I reorganized the decision-making flow and restructured the departments with near-surgical precision. It wasn't just about efficiency. It was about finally putting my mark on every corner of that company. I started bringing in innovations that had been shelved for years, my own ideas that had previously been ignored for seeming too ambitious or untimely. Now, no one dared to question my vision. I introduced Orion, an upgrade to the core platform, with predictive AI that revolutionized how our clients mapped their operations. In less than 6 months, we closed contracts with European conglomerates. We expanded to Berlin, Dublin, and Barcelona. We hired cybersecurity experts from Estonia, engineers from Switzerland, and created an international technology task force. While many were just trying to adapt to the market, we were redesigning it. With every new quarter, revenue climbed. The numbers spoke with a clarity I wish I had heard from my parents when I was younger. 1 year later, we surpassed all the company's historical goals, and I finally became a name. Not just within Carrera Technologies, but outside it as well. I was on the covers of business magazines, columns in financial newspapers, and the keynote guest at international conferences. One of the most memorable covers had the headline, "Nancy Carrera, the mind behind the empire." I looked at that photo like someone staring into a strange mirror, recognizing the face but not the story behind the gaze. I was smiling, wearing a white blazer, arms crossed. Strong, serene. But something inside me still trembled subtly on days when the past whispered. Because no matter how much the company flourished, no matter how much applause came, the shadow of rejection still found its way to me. It didn't come in violent waves. It was more like a cold breeze on very quiet nights. It slipped quietly through the cracks of memory and whispered in my mind with my mother's voice, "Bethany is our pride." It was strange how those words, spoken so long ago, still managed to hurt. Even after all the results, even after proving my worth 1,000 times over. It was as if the scar never fully closed. There were nights when I would sit alone in my glass office, surrounded by trophies and booming reports, and feel silence as a presence. On those nights, I looked out over the city, the lights fading into the horizon, and wondered if all of that had finally been enough. If my soul, hungry for recognition for so many years, had indeed been satisfied. The answer was never clear. Bethany, meanwhile, seemed calm, even relieved. I watched her from afar during our occasional meetings. She spent more time developing an art therapy project for autistic children, something she never dared embrace before because of family expectations. And over time, I realized the throne had never been hers. It was never her desire. She accepted it because she was placed there, like so many other times, like so many other privileges. One afternoon, after a meeting about the merger with a French company, she stayed behind as if waiting for a moment alone with me. When everyone left, she approached slowly, her eyes fixed on mine. "You looked amazing on that cover," she said with a half smile. "Thank you," I replied, restrained. "I was never made for this, you know? The throne, the name, the company." She hesitated, as if searching for the right words. Then she let out, almost in a whisper, "You always were." I was silent. That phrase fell over me like a confession, or perhaps an absolution. For the first time, she admitted what she always knew. And hearing that healed me a little. Not everything, but something. As for my parents, the process was slower. In the first months, they treated me like the CEO, professional, respectful, as if they were walking on eggshells. Maybe they still expected me to explode, to rub it all in their faces, but it was no longer about that. One day, during a dinner with shareholders, my mother pulled me aside near the end of the night. The soft restaurant lights reflected on the cutlery in her eyes, which trembled a little, and not because of age. "Nancy," she said, gently holding my arm as if afraid I would pull away. "I just wanted to tell you, you saved us. Again." I took a deep breath. I looked at her, the woman who spent a lifetime ignoring me, diminishing me, and now looked at me with moist eyes. But I didn't want consolation. "This time," I replied firmly, "I did it for myself." She nodded, swallowing the words she might have prepared, and in that gesture, without kisses, without hugs, without drama, there was something true. It wasn't the apology I always wanted, but it was recognition. Maybe too late. But it came. Still, on certain quiet Sundays, when my apartment is filled with cold coffee and instrumental jazz, I remember the old versions of myself. The 12-year-old girl who got straight A's but only received a nice dear. The young woman who built a functional prototype at 19 and was ignored at the family lunch. The woman who, even revolutionizing the company, was overlooked for not having the right name at the right time. Those versions still live inside me. But now, I am the one writing the future. And it's a future where no brilliant girl will ever have to beg to be seen. A future where I am the reference, not to hurt, not to punish, but to prove that when rejection tries to erase someone, sometimes it only lights the flame of achievement even brighter. What if it were you in my place? If you had given your all, been ignored your whole life, and at the most important moment, been humiliated publicly? Would you have stayed silent? Would you have walked away? Or would you come back? To take back what's yours, like I did? Tell me in the comments what you would do. I really want to know your perspective. And if you liked this powerful story of female revenge, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss stories like this. There's a lot of twists, emotion, and justice coming your way. Oh, click on the video that's appearing on your screen now to watch another breathtaking revenge story. The next story might be even more intense. See you there.